Alrighty, so here we go. All right, so 6 o'clock Central Time, 7 o'clock on the East Coast. This is Artisan Politics. I am Jason Everett Miller. It is my birthday as well, so perfect time to relaunch the show. Really been trying to work out the format of what this show wants to be when it grows up, and since it's only me for now, what I'll be doing is just sort of ranting on everything that's made it to my list in the last week. And I've also invited a guest, Lindsey Brown from New Jersey, who's running against the incumbent Leonard Lance. A progressive Republican running against an incumbent. It's not anything I've ever spoken of before to anyone who knows me. Yeah, and there's also a blog component at www.artisanpolitics.com. Feel free to drop any questions you might have into the stream. I'll try to keep an eye on the Facebook page, but mostly I'll just be talking. So let's get to it. So first up on the list was teachers in the education system. Clearly something amazing is happening all around the country, more notably in red states who have been starving the education system for decades now. The biggest problem, of course, being that we still have this nation of states, a collection of states, each doing their own thing, so you get unequal outcomes, which it's really hard to plan any sort of national goals around a populace who you don't really know from one state to the next, what they've been able to learn if they're going to public school. And clearly, the teachers aren't getting paid either. So it's incredible to me that we would live in a society that won't fully fund education. We're the quote unquote richest society on earth, and too many of our kids are going to school in schools where the roofs are caving in, the seats are falling apart. They haven't had new books, you know, in 15, 16, in some cases 20 years. Um, Not sure. It looks like someone was making a comment somewhere. Let me see if I can go find. Happy birthday. Thanks, Donald. Yeah, 48 years. Um, and what's funny is I've seen the education system uh, when I started school, obviously in the mid 70s and up through the 80s, it was still pretty good. It takes a while to break something that big. Um, and relatively speaking, the teachers were doing pretty good. They made about the same middle class salary that say a plumber would make, or an electrician. And then they stayed stagnant, and I mean everybody stayed stagnant, but teachers more than many professions, especially professions with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees. Um, and now they've had enough. And you know, West Virginia provided the model. They went and advocated and agitated for their positions, and they were rewarded with what they were looking to achieve. Now you have Oklahoma. I think Arizona just went on strike, or are planning a walkout. Um, to my way of thinking, these movements, the Me Too movement as well, Never Again, the teachers, are all populist movements. They're all people-driven grassroots movements that, if done right, should change the expectations of most Americans about what they're getting out of their political system, and hence the government, right? It starts with politics, but eventually they have to govern and do something, or they get fired. Uh, since Trump can't say that to people's faces, I'll use it. Uh-oh, registered trademark. You're respectfully requested to show yourself out the door. So that's good news on the teachers front. My second note was fucking Trump slash GOP, so I guess that fits in there. I'm gonna do my best to keep this mostly R-rated. I'll keep, you know, the F-bombs to a minimum. Try and make it semi-friendly. It bothers me that people get so much more offended by bad language than they do by bad outcomes. You know, you have kids going to bed hungry. I mean, you literally, globally, and I try to tend to think globally too. A lot of what we'll talk about starts in America, but there clearly are global implications to everything we'll be discussing, including, you know, our current president. And the current GOP. And I'll tell you, I've been paying attention for the last decade and watching the results, watching the returns, seeing what legislation passes, what's happening. It's all theater. It's all bread and circus. We've heard that before, but it's totally true. Um, they're distracting us from the fact that the middle class is gone. You know, people who are wealthy keep getting wealthier. People who have no wealth, which is most people, they're a paycheck away from disaster. You know, I've spent too many years in that same spot myself, so I know what I speak. Uh, just trying to. All right, I don't know what that is. Where was I? So a step away from disaster. So when you're in a desperate spot and you're presented with, you know, here's a vision of all the policies that got us to this place, the place that led to your pain, here, vote for her, or Trump, who, you know, you have to admit he played to that enough of a base to run the margin. So in a country like ours and 54% people voting, the margins are desperately thin. So of course, all it took was just a little bit of a lack of enthusiasm across the middle, which equaled 4%, and that's 3 million voters, um, and no wonder we're where we're at. The good news is it appears that the Democratic turnout for the midterms is actually really high. So we're looking at potentially a 2010 situation, but instead of the Tea Party, it appears to be the Progressive Caucus who are fielding candidates, not necessarily in blue districts, but actually in red districts. And if the turnout turns up, then and really turnout hasn't gotten above 40% since 72, I think, is the last time it went above 40%. So turnout for the midterms, all it takes is a 5–10% bump, and all of a sudden you're talking it could be a ridiculous wave of seats flipping that everybody would have sworn up and down the network shows that it would never happen. But it could very well happen. It's that they've goosed the system to a point that it would be relatively easy to take over with just the right people running in every district. Speaking of which, Lindsey Brown in New Jersey is running basically from the center, from sort of that common sense Eisenhower Republican center, against an incumbent who's been in that seat for 10 years. So I'll be interested to talk to her and find out, what her experience has been trying to get that message across. Not only to grassroots Republicans, but in a state like New Jersey, when you go to vote, you can say, you know what, I think I'll vote in the Republican primary instead, and you can switch your party, and then you can switch back for the general if that's what you're into. I think we got to get away from party identity as our main sort of motivating factor when it comes to voting. It doesn't matter. And this drives Democrats crazy when I say that, false equivalency. I'm not saying they're exactly the same. What I'm saying is the policies of both parties have led generally to places of pain for more and more people each and every year. So either they're directly responsible, or by failing to live up to their stated ideals, they're indirectly responsible for just sort of believing that crap and voting for their conscience, and we keep sending them there. Cool, that's what you're getting. Or they're indirectly responsible because they haven't lived up to their stated ideals and tried to push the envelope on progressive ideals, really. I think the last true progressive, I'll give Obama his due in terms of progressive executive orders, but the Congress has been notably lacking. The Supreme Court's actually been doing pretty good, despite some rulings, and I actually think Citizens United was decided properly. And I think people give the preaching to the choir bullhorns way more power than it deserves based on the results of the elections. Just a little bit more people turning out. Most people don't even listen to the ads. So, this idea that the Russians cost Hillary the election, or I bet in hindsight, both the Russians and Trump wish they had just never met each other, and Trump would have just won that thing. He would have still won, even if the Russians weren't involved, even if Comey hadn't given that stupid, the trends, all the polls, everything were trending in that direction towards the end. And, I'm not saying it's Hillary's fault necessarily. I think she probably would have been a good president. She probably would have been as good a president as Obama was. But I don't believe that's really what we needed right now. And a lot of people agreed. And, despite the mostly train wreck that's been going on in our faces, I think it's motivating voters in a way that perhaps Hillary might not have. And without electing new people to Congress, nothing's ever going to change. So that was always going to be a necessary step in the equation. So yeah, you may disagree or agree with Trump, or you may know somebody who voted for him. At a certain point, it's not the Civil War yet. So it should be easy to get over. Just accept it, get over it, and move on. 'Cause that's the only way we're going to start talking about how to solve these many problems. And I don't think it can be done in the Democratic Party alone. That's why I'm excited to talk with Lindsay, because I've always believed that the Republican Party has progressive roots. When you go back to Lincoln, you go back to Teddy Roosevelt, Eisenhower. I think Hoover got a bad rap in a lot of ways. He actually got blamed for a lot of the stuff that Wilson was pulling. So, um, plenty of blame to go around. There's nobody innocent in this country, so we need to get over ourselves and quit thinking we're the only ones with the answers. And if the Republican Party could get back in touch with the progressive roots, and if the Democratic Party could get back in touch with their progressive roots, the whole thing would shift, and the center would become much better defined. And then we can start talking about solutions. And that's not to say that, people, whatever, libertarians who don't believe in government, or, Tea Party guys who I don't even know what they believe in. Are those libertarians? I'm confused. The right's fractured into many sects. Um, Ironically, most of the arguments I get in with now are sort of mainstream Democrats who kind of extort the progressives to get in line, and they believe what the media is saying in terms of, we can't elect, far left candidates. The number of times I've heard that from Democrats and Democratic consultants is kind of sad, actually. I think once again they're missing the boat on this. Progressive candidates of a certain mold drive people to the polls. That's all there is to it. This isn't a fight for the people who normally vote in a primary election. We already know how that fight ends. 51% in blue districts to 49, 51 to 49 in red district. It's ridiculous. So, but if you increase the number of people voting, none of that matters because the margins are so thin. And the people who don't vote right now, especially in midterms, are Gen X and millennials. They're not turning out for the same old, same old. That's just not going to happen. So you need to be speaking in a progressive voice. And I don't think it's realistic that, just demographically, I don't think it's realistic to just turn every red district blue. So it makes a lot more sense to me to turn every red district to sort of a center moderate, like the Republican Party used to be, and then let the Democrats go further left. And then whatever conversation happens in the general election is going to be a lot more reasonable and logical, and not so much personalities and not so much partisanship, and more just sort of debating different ways to address different things. There's a lot of items that are being done at the federal level that are quote unquote liberal that I think might be better done by nonprofits, for instance, or a charity. So, that's just one way to say, hey, we still want to do these things, but we need to figure out a more effective way to deliver them, at the lowest cost, the greatest good, all that. So we're not even having that discussion right now. We're bickering over whether these problems even exist, rather than trying to figure out what's the best solution to fix things. So that's that. Don't really plan on talking about Trump or really the GOP, to tell you the truth. Like, every time they even start talking a little bit on TV, I have to turn it off. Because I hate to say it, because my business is trying to get these people to spend money with me, but there's a lot of alternate reality coming from one side of the aisle. And what's refreshing is sort of the honesty coming from many parts of the Republican Party now, mostly people who have decided to not run for re-election. So, what I'd love to see is moderate. There's a lot of what they call blue dog Democrats or conservative Democrats that in a bygone age used to be in the Republican Party. Why can't we have that more centrist Republican Party that doesn't have sort of an inherent distrust um, and antipathy, really, for government? There's a vital role for government in our society, and I believe in obviously justice system reform. We need to stop wasting 80% of our only renewable resource, which is people, and really start leveraging all that talent that's going to waste because we can't manage a whatever $17 trillion, $21 trillion economy now. Um, it's ridiculous. There's no reason why we can't get this beast under control. And the irony is, it'll be a bigger pie. So yes, we'll have a more even distribution, but it's not like everybody's going to be equal all of a sudden. You're still going to have rich people with obnoxious wealth. I mean, you're still going to have not as rich people who are less obnoxious, I guess, in the upper middle class or lower upper class, whatever. You'll have, we need to have a solid middle class again who can afford to send their kids to college if that's what they're into, or can afford to let them live with them for a few extra years to pursue their art or what have you. We seem to have lost empathy and heart and kind of a sense of each other's humanity, which is really sad to me because I spent a lot of years trying to find those things, and I finally found it myself, and now no one else has it. So, bummer. Um, but where does that lack of empathy come from? I don't really understand it because um, I see a one-to-one empathy in our individual relationships, but when you start to talk about theoretical groups of people that may not be personally relevant, uh, that that empathy gene shuts off. And um, I mean, there's a lot of challenges coming up to humanity, most notably climate change, but other things, resource depletion, pollution, the wealth disparity and the income gaps, transitions to automated manufacturing and robots and artificial intelligence and the disruption that's going to have across massive parts of the economy. So with all those things, all those challenges on the horizon, um, the very least we could do and the easiest thing for us to do to prepare for that is to figure out a way to come together as a human race, and that's on a global scale. And you see bits and pieces of that. We're still trying to do the right thing, generally speaking. Um, you know, I I don't think really any fewer people are dying. Unfortunately, we still seem to excel at that piece, but um, I really think that if America and Americans and we the people, voters in particular, if we can start to turn out in the 60 to 70% range for every single election, like most modern democracies, even ones that don't impose a penalty for not voting, um, we'll start to see dramatic change. Um, because people who previously would never have thought of running are like, oh, well, I guess people are paying attention, and maybe it does make sense for me to get out there and run. Um, you know, there's no way that any district should stay one color versus the other for decades at a time. That's stagnant. That's like the gross water, in the middle of a forest or something. uh, but um, yeah, so we need to transition more too, right? So I think another place where we got trapped is, you look at the relative age of people in Congress, and people on the left start, you ageist. It's like, I'm not being an ageist, but I think it's reasonable that those people should have expected to retire a decade earlier. Um, And it's reasonable for Gen X, who should have been coming up behind them, to assume that the generation ahead of us was looking behind them going, who am I going to raise up to sort of carry the banner for me so I can retire and write my book and get paid a lot of money to speak and act as the elder statesman? Somehow that broke down, because that used to happen. That happened through the World War II generation. They handed it off fairly smoothly to the boomers. But that broke down with the boomer to Gen X transition. So, and that's why we got skipped. So, a lot of that's going straight to the millennials now, which, you know, I'm happy for it. I'll move right into permanent vacation elder statesman now. I'll pick that while I'm young enough to enjoy it. But that doesn't happen, and I think because that doesn't happen, we start to get a politics that reflects a bygone age of a partisanship that was pretty bitter. And you know, I think Barack Obama ran straight into that. He campaigned against it. That was one of the main reasons why I supported his candidacy, as a matter of fact, because I still feel like that's the main thing holding us back. He couldn't move the chains on that at all. Clearly, you know, President Trump was never going to move the chains on that. Whoever comes up in 2020, you know, we'll see what happens with the Mueller investigation and where the facts lie. Clearly, the Dems are taking back the House. They might even get the Senate, depending on turnout. And then buckle up for 2019, because that's going to be a good one. And I'm hoping, honestly, I hope they take both houses, and I hope the Progressive Caucus. I hope that the reason they take both houses, I actually hope they lose a couple. I hope the Democrats lose a couple seats in Democratic districts that are considered competitive now because Trump barely won them or something. I hope they lose a couple of those, but I hope they flip a lot of red seats. And I hope the people flipping those red seats are progressives that ran sort of a grassroots campaign with no official support, because they rarely put anything into a red district, right? So that would be just the turnout flips. And that would be an amazing Congress to see, because they're going to skew much younger. A lot of them are millennials. A lot of them are in their 30s. And it's awesome. And I think it will bring empathy to the Congress. And I think once the Congress has a different face and is speaking different words to the nation, you know, that will inspire us to, you know, I hope Bernie does not run in 2020. And again, that'll probably get me thrown out of the Bernie groups. And just, again, for that reason, I think it should be an elder statesman thing. So what I would love Bernie to do over the next few years is find the candidate he wants to support within the Democratic Party, and then start stumping for that person and get that person moving into pole position to capture that Democratic nomination. Because if it's not a progressive, if it's your old school, you know, neoliberal Democrat centrist, that's not going to get it done in 2020. If Trump's still running, he'll beat that. And if it's somebody else, they might beat that. I actually have, you know, a little hope in that regard too. I think there could be some moderate centrists that mount credible challenges from the right in the Republican primary in 2020, which would be interesting. I think that's where the Democratic primary went wrong in 1980. Is Ted Kennedy took Jimmy Carter to the convention and really weakened him and delivered us Reagan. So another unpopular opinion when it comes to the Democrats, blaming Kennedy for all this. But I do. It was hubris. They should have supported Carter. I think he could have gotten a second term if he had gotten a second term. I think a lot of things would have been drastically different. And for the better, because he probably would have had a Republican Congress, and maybe that Republican Congress, you know, would have been a different type of Republican. Maybe they would have gone back. And even Nixon was a more old school Republican from a policy standpoint. So if they could have regained that center, even with the Jimmy Carter second term. Imagine if, right? It's easy for me to write those novels. Uh, so a thing that I've found interesting, and like I said, I've been doing this now for about 10 years, pretty much nonstop, ingesting political data, watching the mainstream media. I don't really watch Fox, I'll admit that, because I just can't. It literally makes, there's a spot behind my eye that just starts to throb, so I can't do it. But the other ones I consume on a regular basis, the print publications, TV, cable news networks, local as much as I can. Um, and a lot of Republicans now are hyperventilating over President Trump, and except for the bluster and some of the, other less savory issues, um, he's policy-wise, nothing has changed. The Republican Party is still pursuing the same policies they've always pursued, passing the same tax cuts that favor the similar constituencies, doubling down on strategies that honestly have not delivered returns. And again, it delivers returns for a slice of America. Um, and it's still way out of balance. And it was out of balance under Obama. It was out of balance under Bush. It was out of balance under Clinton. It's been out of balance for a long time. So again, I blame both parties equally for that. But from the Republican standpoint, I mean, the Tea Party took over in 2010, and their rhetoric and the way they talk about the Democrats and the way they talk about government hasn't changed. And the goals that they were pursuing hasn't changed. So I just find it kind of hypocritical that all these quote unquote, I'm a moderate Republican. Trump was the straw that broke the camel's back. But the Republican Party has been this way for several decades. At least since Reagan. And it really picked up steam under Gingrich. So the idea that any of this is new, it just doesn't pass the smell test for me. William Crystal, I mean, some of those guys, I mean, it's a little hypocritical, I have to say. And I wish, if they are truly having a change of heart, they would not just comment on the unsavoriness and sort of the presentation, the medium, and go to the heart of the message. And, let's talk about these policies that the Republican Party has been pursuing for the last 3 decades that have now found their culmination under Speaker Ryan and President Trump. Let's have that debate. What have the returns been? Let's look at what was done underneath when the Democrats had control for 2 years. It wasn't as big a control as Republicans. Get that straight. There is no false equivalency there. They barely had their Senate majority, barely. And there's a huge conservative caucus in the Democratic Party that doesn't exist in the Republicans. So it's apples and orangutans. But let's have that conversation for sure. And if you truly want to start to get rid of partisan politics and start to look at these things logically and stop casting aspersions on every single thing the Democrats try to get done, realizing that a lot of what they want to get done have been things that the Republicans always said they wanted to do, up to and including the Affordable Care Act. And y'all voted against that en masse. A Republican plan. So, all right. So, I don't know about you, but every product I own sucks. It's a piece of crap. And I don't know why that is. It wasn't always that way. You used to be able to buy something and keep it for, how long have I had this? Oh, like 10, 15 years. Now, things break. I'm surprised. I'm shocked if I have something longer than a year or two. And yeah, it's just something I wrote down, and it's like it reminds me of the movie Wall-E. That it becomes a planet full of garbage, and we're already seeing that. I just saw this report on BBC about Thailand where they're just choking to death on plastic garbage in these rivers. Um, then another friend of mine posted this link on Facebook. Wolf posted a link on Facebook about uh, a group of scientists finding a microbe that eats plastic, which made me think of the science fiction uh, post-apocalyptic book I read, where a group of scientists created a microbe that ate plastic, and it got so good at eating plastic, it said, let's go to the base material, oil, and ate everything made from oil in civilization in the span of like 10 years. Put that in your brain. Think of how many things we make from oil right now. And if it just within, a couple of years it was all gone, civilization would be over for sure. That's definitely zombie apocalypse time. So we need to start replacing that with other things. The awesome news is that hemp used to be, prior to oil, hemp was used for a lot of those things, and it could once again be used for those things. Um, we should probably stop eating commodity corn and commodity soy. So those biomaterials could be leveraged for all kinds of things, including fuel. Um, we just need to start doing things smarter. And the first step to that is electing better people to serve us in government. The beautiful thing about focusing on the districts, the congressional districts, is it's 700,000 people who've been mostly, homogenized through data science, apparently. Um, but the key feature of which is most of them don't vote in primaries. So when you have an audience that's just basically been waiting to get spoken to, which is what Obama tapped into in 2008, by the way. That was a 50-state primary campaign that he had to wage to get that nomination. So, it's kind of the same thing, but even more hyper-local. Um, you don't have to worry about the whole wide world. You need to worry about that district. Um, and I think it could be pretty easy to get those voters turning out. I don't know where I was going with that. So yeah, so it seems like there's a bit of Stockholm syndrome going on in the GOP. Probably started when the Tea Party took over in 2010, solidified those gains in 2014. Have basically had their way now for a full 10 years. And I think there's good things and bad things that they could probably take credit for. Bad things are fairly obvious. I don't really want to spend a lot of time going into those. There are some good things. The economy has been growing pretty well. It grew well under Obama. Nothing that's happened since Trump was elected has stopped that growth. So I know they want to all take credit. Fine, take credit. I'm beyond credit. It doesn't matter who takes credit. The historical record will take credit eventually. So who takes credit today is immaterial to me. Fact of the matter remains is that economy keeps going up. International organizations and treaties seem to be getting tighter. Obviously the internet, I think Facebook has helped out enormously with that, and we'll get to Facebook later because I think they're getting raked over the coals. And if Apple and MSNBC comes out with a competing social network, you'll know I was right. Because again, the hyperbole and the hyperventilation on that one, and nobody even basically blinked an eye over Equifax. Smell test doesn't pass it. All right. Hey, that was next on my list actually. um, so yeah, Wired, Business Week, Apple. I mean, all these players are going on and on about the data, and most of the data was public data that was scraped. Most people understand Facebook's business model and don't care about it. The price they're paying to get this really cool free service that lets them talk with all their family and friends and interact with their favorite brands and celebrities and what have you. The price they pay for that is Facebook making money off of showing us stuff that we probably might want to buy if we have some extra cash. It's a good relationship. Stop trying to interject, you know, this boogeyman of data, because honestly, data on the individual level is pretty much worthless. You know, the things I like, the things I comment on, most of that's public. If someone cared, they could go look at my activities and check it out. Whatever. The internet's written in ink, and if you don't already understand that, you're not paying attention. Um, and what's more is the technology guys, especially, they know better. They know that none of this stuff with Facebook is a big deal. And they know that nothing Cambridge Analytica did, no matter what they sold to their clients, actually affected the election. All you have to do is run the numbers. People give me crap for being too focused on the numbers. Well, I'm sorry, but preaching to the choir doesn't change minds. Never has, never will. So, the fact that that people who already didn't like Hillary saw ads that said, "Hey, don't like Hillary? We hate Hillary too." Boo! Didn't change their mind. And the people that had a more open mind got different ads based on what they're into. So it does it the most I'm willing to stipulate is that it might have hardened lines on the edges of these margins for some people. You know, I don't think the James Comey thing really affected the election either. What did he really say? There's nothing he said in that press conference that changed my mind. I still voted for Hillary. I wasn't thrilled about it. I supported Bernie. But me and 88% of the Bernie supporters voted for Hillary because it made sense given the choice. The unfortunate thing, and I bet a lot of the conservative or the moderate Republicans who stayed home, who voted for Obama twice, independents who voted for Obama twice but stayed home in 2016, I bet they're kicking themselves in the ass, especially those guys in the upper Midwest, because they're the ones with the jobs that are freaking disappearing. And they bought a load of crap that's never going to be delivered. So there is that. So I think she would have been an able steward of the empire, but I don't know that she nor Obama, for that matter, were ever going to advance us in a direction like somebody like Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard, Keith Ellison. I'm actually kind of hopeful that he's in a leadership position at the DNC. We'll see if he is able to affect that. Haven't really seen it so far, but I'm willing to give everybody the benefit of the doubt at this point. And you know, and that kind of brings me to another place. We've gotten so far away from empathy and humanity that we ascribe malicious intent to every mistake and every misstep. There was a great quote. I don't remember who it was from, but essentially it said, "There's no reason to ascribe to malice when simple stupidity will suffice," as sort of an explanation. And that makes sense to me. I would like to believe that most people aren't malicious, that they maybe not stupid, maybe that's not the right word, but you know, they're busy, they're lazy, they're not as geeky as I am about looking up things that don't make sense. They just gloss it off, or maybe they register it and go, that's weird. You know, who knows? Everybody's different. That's why I think it's dangerous to give any of these mediums, be it Twitter, and Twitter's like drinking from a fire hose. Nobody's mind's being changed by anything they're saying on Twitter. So it's just ridiculous to even think that. So, you know, and that essential disconnect is that, you know, it's where Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and Twitter and all these other tech companies make their money is your aggregated data. It's not you, the individual. It's you and other people like you doing things in a similar fashion that allow businesses to make assumptions so they know where to invest their dollars in terms of manufacturing and blah 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 and so forth. So it's intelligence. It's a net benefit to everybody involved. So creating an environment where we're all paranoid about quote unquote privacy. Dude, you want privacy? Go in your home, turn off your computer. Privacy achieved. If you're walking down the public street, no privacy. If you're even driving around in a public street, there's implied consent to search in every single state. So they don't need much of a reason to pull you over and look in your car. Unfortunately, usually that reason is you're black or brown. That's coming up later. So I just wish people would back off, Zuckerberg, Facebook, Twitter, social media, millennials, how they take in information, the future that's emerging. I'm sorry, if you can't keep up, get off the boat or whatever, go hang out on the deck while the rest of us run the boat. On the fan deck or whatever they call it, the sun deck. Because things are just going to get faster. That's not going to slow down. And as the global economy continues to emerge and coalesce, again, I suspect global climate change is going to start to collapse borders in a lot of ways when it comes to resource allocation and global sort of manpower and crops, and because it's going to shift things significantly. To the point where nationalism is probably going to have to take a back seat to humanism. It's going to have to take a back seat to, dude, we got one planet and we almost killed it. So we might need to chill for a second, pull together. We can keep our identity. We can still be Americans or Russians or Israelis or Britons or French or whatever, Dutch, not African. Well, African, Ethiopian, South African. We can be all that. Argentinian, Chilean. But above that, kind of like the United States, we all come from a state, but we all have a United States, an American identity. So we need to be Earthlings first, and then have pride in our local environment and try to make it as good as possible. But we're trying to make it as good as possible because the Earth has needs that are going unfulfilled. We're bad stewards of our planet. So we need to make sure that we take a round turn on that. And I'm assuming you're hearing me. I'm watching my mic. I'm not actually hearing anything in my headphones, so I think that'll come in when I get Lindsay on Skype. Appreciate you tuning in to Artisan Politics. This is going to be the format for the next little while, just me sort of ranting on things that I've written down as I watch different shows. I think I beat the Facebook thing into the ground. Oh, the whole page. So, yeah. So I'm not gonna use the specific language that I use when I write things down because it's pretty rough. I do want to try to make this program as accessible as possible, and if it's filled with beep 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 like my real life would be, that's no bueno. So I've been talking about getting into arguments with people in the center of the Democratic Party, kind of the people who have been Clinton supporters and they're turned into Obama supporters, and they've been sort of the base, right? The base who've been there for decades, and they skew older by and large. They've been blaming Bernie Sanders supporters and Jill Stein supporters for the loss, or the Russians they blame for the loss, or whoever blaming for the loss. I can point to a couple different blogs that I wrote at the time saying she was running the wrong campaign. And if she had just had the confidence to add Bernie to the ticket as VP, we wouldn't even be having a lot of these discussions. We'd be having different discussions for sure, because it still would have been a partisan nightmare in Washington. So, um, but where I'm also starting to see arguments, and I've always had whatever arguments over just historical record stuff that I can link to multiple sources with folks on the far right. And the far right obviously is most of the Republican Party now. But I don't think it is. I think it's the most vocal part of the Republican Party now. So I expect to have those arguments. I expect to get unfriended by those people. But where I've been surprised to be having arguments is with folks on the left, progressives. And it's because they're really, really intolerant. I mean, this one guy, went so far as to like call me a racist. God, what was he calling me a racist for? I forget now. But it was absurd. I mean, literally, we argued for a couple days out in Twitter. He took it to Black Twitter halfway through the thing. So I'm the racist, but halfway through the argument, he says, let's take your comments to Black Twitter and see what they have to say. I'm like, come on, don't you say? I mean, ironies continues to die a nasty death in America. So anyway, what do they call them? Social justice warriors. So they've decided I can't say it's all of them, but a number of the ones that I have interacted with in the recent future, since Trump's election mostly, is that it's a purity thing. It's you believe in everything I believe in, you agree with everything I say, or I'm going nuclear on you and I'm taking you out. And strangely enough, that was the exact same response that happened when the Democrats took over in 2008. And it provoked the predictable backlash from far right Republicans. So it's like the fact that we can't learn these lessons over and over, and it's well documented. I mean, if you just care even a little bit for your kid's future, it's easy to see the threads of our disease. I mentioned Jimmy Carter earlier, and he got a lot of crap for malaise and talking about the American malaise. But he was right. He was absolutely right in everything he said, and he's been right pretty much down the line in everything he said. And even he was fairly conservative in a lot of ways, and that's why I just get so annoyed by this idea that this is conservative, this is liberal, this is progressive, this is regressive, this is blah 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 whatever. I've listened to everybody's arguments, and once you remove the ego and you remove the emotion, and you're left with just what it is they're trying to accomplish and what it is they've offered as a possible solution. Some of them aren't bad, or some of them are workable, or some of them are like, hey, let's talk about that. Here's how that might interact with this person's thing over here and this person's thing over here. But we don't approach anything in politics that way. And it is, I think, polluting our interpersonal relationships. You see it on the road. People are more selfish. They're kind of passive aggressive. They speed up, they slow down, and they don't use their blinker. It's we're all angry. We got to stop being so damn angry. And don't get me wrong, I'm angry too. But I've decided that the only logical response to any of it is to smile, continue to look at the data, continue to try to divorce the rampant editorialism that's found everywhere. Very little of the media, and I put that in quotes because it's such a broad category, you can't even say the media. But a lot of it these days is very editorialized. You really get a feel for what the writer or what the producer or what the paper, the publisher believes about a certain subject. And it's been that way throughout our history. It's not like we had complete objectivity up until now. You know, we started off with a nation of pamphlets with competing opinions about the items of the day. Um, that said, uh, we had a nice period of time through the 60s and 70s and kind of inching into the early 80s. I don't know when the Fairness Doctrine was. I think that was under Clinton, but it was prompted. So through the 80s. So, you know, coming out of World War II and through the 80s, I think we had a pretty good media. There was no right media, left media. Most of the companies that own the news organizations understood that they may lose some money from it. They weren't expecting to make money from it. It was done more as a public trust. The people who went into journalism did it with that framework in mind. I feel like most of the people that still go into it do it with that framework in mind. But once you get to a certain level, welcome to the machine. So you do what you're told to do, or you don't sit in that chair anymore. You know, the beautiful thing about the internet and podcasts like this one is that, you know, we're going around that to a certain extent. And you can consume your news however you want to consume your news. And for me, I watch everything. I take in every viewpoint, with the exception of Fox News, and like Breitbart or any of the far right stuff. And I don't really even check out the far left stuff. So it's mostly, you know, like The Economist to MSNBC is probably as liberal as it gets. I mean, I'll read, you know, some of the like a Rolling Stone article or something from time to time. That's Matt Taibbi can be pretty liberal. Point being is I don't really consume news in sort of a hyper emotional state. I'm just there for the information. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. So my charge to myself as a writer and someone who likes to comment on all this stuff is just to take in everything I can and chew on it for as long as I need to, and then come to some sort of conclusion that, you know, does its best to remove my ego and emotion from the equation. And a lot of times I come down on the right side of things, and a lot of times I come down on the left. Mostly I come down on the left side. Hey, we should be doing all this great stuff as a society, but how are we going to pay for it? And that is where the right mind comes in. But where I go someplace different on the right, it isn't how are we going to pay for it? Boo, I don't want to spend money. No, what's the best way to pay for it? How do we structure, for instance, Social Security? As soon as guaranteed defined pensions started disappearing from companies, Social Security should have been transitioning into that role. You know, I should be able to have a pension-like retirement on Social Security, and that starts early. You know, so the defined contribution maybe should have been a little bit higher. But you know, you make it sacrosanct, and you give people the ability to increase their Social Security contribution, and then it's the Social Security pension that again is a defined benefit. You know what you're going to get. Add single payer healthcare to that, dude. That's conservative. Single payer is way more conservative than the Affordable Care Act, and Obama knew that. He just couldn't sell it. You know, so I mean, I appreciate his pragmatism in. He said, you know what, I think I can get the ACA through the Democratic Congress. No way am I getting single payer through. And he had to get ACA, which is a Republican bill. He had to get it through without a single Republican vote. So good on you. And it actually slowed down the bleeding. So, you know, it kept our system afloat until we can come to terms with the single payer stuff. From what I understand, more states are starting to look at single payer systems too. So maybe like marijuana legalization, the states will take the charge on that one. And, you know, obviously it's blue states by and large. And again, I hate the red-blue divide. I think it's just what people, ooh, I'm going to be able to call in. See, let me get Skype tuned up. I think it's what people call, I forget what I was saying. No worries. All right. So social justice warriors, relax. The reason nobody wants to do what you want them to do is because of the way you discuss your politics and the going for the jugular every time. So Fox News, I don't really talk about that. We know what's going on there. Oh my God. I hold my tongue on that. Already talked about that. Moving right through the stuff here. Oh, by the way, you can hit me with a comment on the live stream if you want, and I'm happy to discuss new things. Hang on, I need to sign into Artisan Politics. So if you're watching, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate the eyeballs. Go find Lindsay's name. Excuse me. All right, 6:58. So we got 2 minutes, and then I'll give her a call. We'll chat a little bit about her run up there in New Jersey. So let me see here. Elon Musk, dude's busting me up. So he's another one that's been hyperventilating about the Facebook thing and artificial intelligence, and you know, for a guy whose solutions to big problems is so optimistic, he seems to take a very pessimistic frame of view on some things. Let me see if I can. Hang on. I hate Skype, dude. Dude, how do you seriously hate Skype? What the heck? Alright. Not sure what's going on there. Bear with me 1 second, trying to get this. I can't call somebody. Let me try signing into my other account. Dude. Alrighty. Don't get it. I hate Skype. All right. All right, looks like we've got her. Oh, we got video too. I love technology. Hang on, let me try and figure this out real quick. Um, you're not going to be able to see my video, but I'm going to try to transmit yours. Oh, there we go. No, wrong one. All right, let me see if I can get some audio here. Bear with me. I'm having to do like show and engineering at the same time, so I can't hear you yet, but I'm gonna try to get us there. Okay. Hate Skype. All right. So you're on the stream, so that's step one. And I'm not hearing any audio from that device. Hmm. Hmm. I hate technical difficulties. Um, why would just doesn't make any sense. Can you hear me? You can hear me, and I can't hear you. Holy moly. All right, let me keep working on this. If you're not busy, I'm gonna keep just try and solve this. So if you just want to stand by, I'll just keep working on it until I can hear some background noise coming from your side. Okay. It won't let me click on anything. It's very annoying. Do you have Hangouts? Google Hangouts? You want to try that? I'll shoot you my Hangouts. I'll spin up Hangouts and shoot it to you. Okay, one sec. Thank you. Appreciate the patience. Yeah. All right. So it's Miller. And let's go turn on the Hangouts. All right. So this is Lindsay's website here. This is who we'll be talking to soon. I think. Oh, there we go. What the heck? Oh, there we go. Still no audio. What the heck? It's a lot better connection though. It looks wonderful. I just can't hear anything. Hang on. Let's see what's going on here. I mean, it's showing that it's getting audio. It's just so bizarre. Well, I'm kind of bummed. I was looking forward to this conversation actually. I appreciate you hanging in there with me. But I just cannot figure this out. Here, let's try one more thing. Audio input device. See, I'm just not even getting anything in my headphones from you at all. So it's clearly something on my end is just not. See, I've been having a problem talking to my mom on Skype too. Like we actually have the cell phone propped up on speaker and we're talking on Skype, and it's very like Gen X boomer use of technology. But tell you what, I'll let you finish your evening, and I am going to get back in touch with you. I'm going to figure out what my problem is, and I'd love to have you on for next week's show. I'm going to keep trying to do this on a regular basis, and we'll definitely get you on before your primary. Thanks. Safe travels. Bye-bye. That was fun. That's, it's not the preferred method of doing interviews, but the comedic value alone, I guess, is worth it. So anyway, Lindsay is like I said, running in the New Jersey 7th district against a Republican. I think his name's Leonard Lance. He's been in that seat for 10 years. I suspect he's had no credible challenges. We have, let me get this up. So I found this awesome place on the congressional website that basically is all the reports of the congressional elections. So this is 2014, the last midterm. just some round numbers, most congressional districts are around 700,000 people as of the last census. So the total vote in the total vote in the primary, which is what Lindsay's competing in, was 37,000 people in a district of 700,000 people. And that alone just tells me that it's little wonder that it's not worse, that things aren't more broken, because we've been absentee landlords for a long time. And by we, I mean we the people. Have been absentee landlords for a long time now with this stuff. You'll notice total 29,000 people in the Republican primary in this district that's probably been in the Republican Party long before Leonard Lance got there in 2008. Look how few Democrats voted. Janice Kovach ran unopposed in the Democratic primary, and only 8,000 turned out. So, don't tell me we can't change things. Look how many turned out for the general. 68,000. If 68,000 turned out for the primary, or even half that turned out for the primary, this number would have easily been outpaced this 104. That's just a snapshot of one district. But the simple fact remains that district is a microcosm of what's going on everywhere in all 435 districts every 2 years. And presidential election years might be twice this number, but that's still pathetic. So, we're never going to get out of this mess unless we really start, doing our best to vote smarter and vote more consistently and pay attention to politics and stop being so emotional about it. And, it's okay if you're wrong, and it's okay if you have to come to a compromise on something. But don't start from a compromised position. Start from a position of passion and purpose and, kind of intellectual integrity. Advocate for your position with that passion and purpose, but don't do it to the point where you're not listening to what the other person's saying and going, you know what, we're not that far off. We can get there. Like we can marry up these two ideas in a way that lets us both take credit. That's the problem. It's politics and hence government at the end of that has turned into a zero-sum game. And that's just not the way it works. Not the way it works when it's working well. And we're leaving a lot of money on the table with regards to what we're doing in America. So yeah, Elon Musk, relax on the apocalyptic visions for our future. Again, a lot of people hyperventilate over the fact that Trump went ahead and bombed Syria, and that the first thing you see is wag the dog, conspiracies and what have you. And make no mistake, I'm sure the president is happy to have something to distract from some of the other news items of the day. And he seems to feel strongly about punishing America's enemies. So good on him. But that same trio of countries, the UK, France, and America, United States, bombed Libya under Obama. We've been bombing the crap out of people since our whole history as a country has had a lot of bombs involved for one reason or another. So again, keep your eye on the ball. It's the EPA not regulating. It's not doing what we've always done and hyperventilating over it. It's all these little places where things are being done that have never been done that shouldn't be done. And they're going to continue to be done until we start paying attention. Because Pruitt, yeah, they may be talking about the money he spent or whatever, but there's been a lot of things undone at the EPA and a lot of things undone at Interior. A lot of roads not taken already, and that's just going to continue to get worse. All right, so we've got that. So another thing, obviously, right now is generational politics, and the simple fact is that there's 3 generations right now who are all voting, and they all have drastically different ways of looking at history, contemporary history, recent history. Obviously, the boomers' memory goes back, whatever, late 40s, mid to late 40s. And then Gen X is like the 70s, and apparently now late 60s because they added that. They're always changing. So that's another thing you got to remember. They're always changing where the generations stop and start. So up until recently, Generation X was like 1970. I saw some 68s, but mostly 1970 to 1981 was Gen X for 11 years. I don't know why. Or maybe it was 1980. Now it's 65 to 80. Now the boomers are 45 to 65 or 64. The millennials are now 81 to 2000 or whatever. So they're another 20-year generation. So whatever. My main point being is the differences between the generations are significant in terms of touchstones and where we came from and sort of how we grew up with our brains being wired by our experiences. But the things we have in common far outweigh those differences still. The millennials have faced challenges that most Gen Xers or a good number of Gen Xers and most of the boomers never had to face in terms of like affordability of college and, having jobs that would deliver a good enough wage to manage sort of the basics of living. Having to be tossed into the deep end of the pool economically from an early age is rough, trust me. And I've been doing it far longer than I would have liked. And I went to college late. I didn't even start college till I was 34. And I finished my master's when I was 40. So there you go. Which is why I have a lot of affection and a lot in common with millennials, and plus my little brother is one. I remember him being born and him coming up, so being able to see the world through his eyes has helped. And now he's almost 40. Ouch. But where we need to come together is sort of an eye to the future, right? So we got 3 generations that now we need to come together for the 7 generations to come. And Gen Z is coming up right behind it. And I'm hoping at the end of Gen Z that we no longer sort of keep those distinctions, because they're artificial distinctions that are unnecessary, like race. Artificial distinction, unnecessary, counterproductive to our end goal as a human species, which should be transcendence. It should be evolution. It should be fucking superpowers. And I believe all of that's possible through some combination of genetics, technology, things we don't know right now about things we don't know right now. But we'll never get to those things if we kill ourselves first. And that's where we're at. That's the transition that we're in, is do we survive together or do we die as individuals? So stop having generational politics keep you from having a discussion that doesn't start off with sort of a condescending tone. Oh, you young whippersnapper, the condescending stuff usually comes from the top down. That's not like a young person to old person thing, normally. So let's get over that. already talked about blaming the other guy. So I'll get into that a little bit more, though. The reason partisanship is so damaging and the reason it keeps us from achieving our goals isn't because we disagree as party. Just because Republicans and Democrats disagree isn't necessarily a recipe for dysfunction. What is a recipe for dysfunction is when we blame our own dysfunction on the other guy and refuse to accept any sort of criticism or analysis of our actions, whatever they may be. If you consider yourself a conservative and a Republican, you need to examine what's been done independent of any blame that you think the Democrats deserve for whatever, and vice versa. If you're a Democrat, you have to sort of look at what the Democrats have ran on, what they've espoused, what they've tried to accomplish, and then judge those accomplishments independent of the other guy. Because that's the only way we're going to get better people in the primary who, might run against the main party's orthodoxy. And at a certain point, gerrymandering becomes immaterial, because if you're constantly turning over people in the primary, just because one party happens to have ascendancy, as a matter of fact, that'll just start flipping. It'll be red one year, blue the next, because more people are involved, and the two candidates who are running, one Republican, one Democrat, are probably both what you would call moderates. In the Democratic frame of mind, it's going to be a Bernie Sanders. It's going to be a more of a progressive voice. On the Republican side of the House, it's going to be, there's no real... Lincoln Chafee used to be one. What's her name from New Hampshire? Snow? I don't know. There used to be a couple moderate Republican women in the Senate. That mindset on the right, then whatever happens in the general election is going to be a good discussion. It's going to be a worthwhile discussion. It's going to have intellectual integrity. It's going to have there's not going to be any of this, cutthroat politics. And that's why I think ultimately Citizens United is actually a good thing. We should never curtail liberty if at all possible. And when it comes to the First Amendment, that is brutally important. It's up to us as to whether or not we listen to that propaganda. And if you're not savvy enough to see an obvious propaganda piece from a corporate interest, I just tune it out. I don't even see them anymore. Or I look at them and go, oh, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's lacking context. Oh, or I think, oh, I'll look that up and see if that's really true. Just because a big business or a politician or whatever is running an ad doesn't necessarily mean that what they're trying to accomplish is bad. And likewise, it doesn't have to influence who we decide to vote for as voters. So have at it, dude. You want to waste money? It honestly, it puts money back into the economy, if you want to look at it that way. But there's no reason to believe any of it. You're not beholden to believing any of it. And if you do believe it, you should check it still. You should check it especially. Check it if it sounds like bullcrap. Check it twice if you think it's right. That is a good rule of thumb. Because it's when something confirms our bias that we're at our most stupid as voters. It's only when our biases are challenged that we seek out new information and incorporate it into that larger worldview. So I think we can get back to that. And if we get back to that, our government systems and processes will start to reflect that more thoughtful frame of mind. And then rinse and repeat as long as it takes for us to catch up with the rest of the freaking developed world. And while we're at it, start to strengthen international ties. And, I disagree with Bernie over TPP. I think it was a great idea. I think the idea that we can shove the globalization genie back in the bottle is a little bit naive. And, it shows why, even Bernie, as much as I liked most of his politics, probably would have tried to do some things that I didn't agree with, and that's okay. If we get 60% of the way every 2 years, we're that much further ahead. If we keep falling backwards, it's just bad. And there's consequences up and down the ticket too, right? So if we start focusing on that person who's sitting in the seat in Washington, D.C., and get interested in that, chances are we're going to be looking at people closer to home as well. All politics is local, and it definitely starts out that way. And the people that end up in D.C. a lot of times start off in local offices. So understanding, what were they doing and how well did they do it prior to advancing them up the chain seems to make sense to me. So, let me see here. Martin Luther King Jr. quote. If you're ever going to be truly free, you have to give up the love of wealth and the fear of death. So that was out of that King in the Wilderness on HBO. For sure. Absolutely. That's not to say that you're going to be, immune to the enticements of wealth. But you can't love it. It's immaterial. There's other things to love. You can like it at best. And then fear of death. Why fear death? There's no point in fearing death. There is no death. There is no time. Energy can not be destroyed. It can only change forms. So fear not. I'm not going to bag on the boomers. They know what's up. I've written that blog a time or two. I just wish they'd relax, have a beer. He's so crazy. I'm down to the last one. Bernie Obama. I don't understand that. Bernie Obama. I guess that means that, despite many of Bernie Sanders' tactics being, or many of Bernie Sanders' policy prescriptions being what you would consider progressive, his demeanor and his tact was very Obama-esque. And I think he ran an Obama-esque campaign. Because he was an independent and because he came in as sort of an insurgent candidate, he absolutely did not get the DNC support as well. They were well within their rights to withhold that support. But he still did awesome. And it was because, like Obama in 2008, people wanted to hear a vision for the future that could give them renewed optimism that their circumstances could be different, that they could change for the better. Even Trump's pitch, if you peel away all the nationalism and, a lot of racism, sorry to say, I have to say it. I hate to have to apologize, but if you know me, you know why I'm doing that. Nativism and nativist, I guess. Nationalism and nativist impulses in our country in order to get to the win. Where was I going with that? Oh, it was essentially, hey, I get it. You're in pain. And I think, because I've been super successful, I can make you successful too. That was the message they were buying. All the rest of it was just noise. It was window dressing. The fact that the Democratic Party, ended up nominating Hillary, and again, she won it fair and square. I don't think they cheated. But having said that, the superdelegates actually are charged with overturning the results of primary elections if needed by the current circumstances. So while she definitely deserved it and she had every right to run against Donald Trump and ultimately lose, I don't think that was the right decision. And I think if they had at least gone as far as nominating, putting Bernie in the pole position or in the secondary seat as VP, that might have been enough to get them over the top. The problem was no enthusiasm. And again, I don't blame Hillary Clinton for that. That's just not who she is. I mean, it's like you can't expect somebody to be somebody they aren't. And I kind of blame everybody around her for not being honest enough to point that out. And, I don't know if there was a solution. Maybe if people would have been honest with her, she would have been trainable and she would have taken on some new skills. I mean, I have to believe that she didn't see that loss coming. And none of the polls saw it coming either. I kind of saw it coming. And again, I'm sad for her. But that kind of was the way it was always going to be. And now we're heading towards something fierce. And I think, I think the Democrats will likely take the House. There's a pretty good chance they could take the Senate. Mostly because I think there's seats that are going to flip that nobody even thinks is going to, like, nobody's predicting it. Nobody thinks it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen. I think there's going to be a huge bump in turnout. I think we'll go from 37% in 2014 to at least 42% and probably getting closer to 50. That's a huge, huge change that will blow the margins in a lot of gerrymandered districts. So we could be seeing something like, the freshman class of 2010 when the Tea Party caucus and the Freedom Caucus. Sorry, I hate to be that guy, but I have to be that guy. It's a fine line. None of them will ever watch this. Probably no one will ever watch this, but we'll see. At a certain point, people will just start catching up with. With what I'm doing, and this earlier stuff will likely die on the vine. Until there's machine learning and somebody stitches it together into my actual Max Headroom persona. I'll give them plenty of words to work from. So the Democrats taking over obviously changes the entire nature of the conversation in Washington, D.C., so we'll have to buckle up and see how that plays out. I'd love to see it play out with progressives and the Progressive Caucus taking, a leadership position in the Democratic Party. That would force the Republicans to have a real sort of, what do they call it? Come to Jesus moment, ironically. And then they can decide who they want to be for the 21st century. I'd love to see them get in touch with their roots, go back to Eisenhower, Teddy Roosevelt, and Lincoln, craft an agenda that those three gentlemen could support, and then present that in opposition to like the Bernie Sanders Democrats, who I think are going to gain ascendancy in the coming years, especially since all the, I call them kids, they are kids to my frame of reference, all the kids pushing the Never Again movement, as they're all talking about voting and wanting to vote. And that was never anywhere in my generation. I never heard that in the millennial generation either, which explains why Bernie didn't make it through the primaries, because Gen X and millennials still turned out at like 32% combined. Can't survive those numbers. So he would have won easily, handily, if we would have been, even 5 or 10% higher. That being said, we can get the turnout bumped in 2018. That sends a message. 2020 could really see somebody like a Tulsi Gabbard or whoever, maybe a Gabbard Ellison ticket or an Ellison Gabbard ticket. I don't even care. But I'd like to see something authentically progressive, and then we'll see what emerges out of the Republican Party. I suspect it would be a Republican nobody's ever even heard of right now, or like I said, somebody like a Lincoln Chafee, but Gen X, probably going to be a vet. I would have loved to seen, it's too late because Beto O'Rourke was already a Democratic congressman, But imagine if he had, initially won as a Republican. And then, because he's a pretty moderate dude, he could easily be a center-right moderate Republican in Texas. So imagine if he's running against Ted Cruz. That's a slam dunk. He'd be already running away with it. It would have been over a long time ago. So there's no reason why we can't sort of reconfigure our political spectrum to be a little bit more logical and a lot less emotional. And more focused on the future and cooperation and the fact that the planet's getting ready to kill our ass. And if we don't pull together, we're done. That's it. Turn the lights out. It's over. It's over. It's over. Name that movie. So that's a good transition. My notes are over. Almost made 2 full hours of just me chatting. Had tried to get Lindsay on the line, but I'm having issues getting audio from some of these applications. So I'm going to have to fix that for the next show, do some tests, and we'll have her on and get her take on things and see how things are going up there in New Jersey with her insurgent campaign in the Republican primary. So that's it. I'm Jason Everett Miller. This has been Artisan Politics. I'll be reposting this to YouTube, so if you want to check it out there, you can check it out there. I think it'll probably post to my Facebook page, so you can check it out there. Feel free to leave comments on the video stream. I'll answer them as they come in until the next show. I'm going to try to do this on a fairly frequent basis, at least once a week, if not more. And yeah, we'll keep it going. Peace.